Every single game you come across, there will often be one character that is doing a bit too much and shutting down you or your whole team. That's why in this video, we're going to be going over at least one tip for every single hero on how to counter them and other heroes that are good against them. Now, wasting no more time, let's talk about Ana. And Anas don't always dominate a game, but it's really going to depend on how consistently an Ana is landing these giant nades against your team. That's going to be the ones that are turning team fights like crazy, and I'll give you a couple tips against an Ana. Number one, if you're playing a high ground position or an off angle position, it's a lot harder for this Ana to get these giant nades. And I've been coaching clients where they'll just all 5 stack together, and then an Ana will throw a nade and get 4 people, and they'll lose a fight based on one ability. So keep that in mind. If you're on the high ground, not only is it harder to get a nade onto you, but if the Ana has to isolate aggressive nades, that means they're going to be less impactful on average. The other tip I'll give you, if you're walking into a fight with a nano combo, whether it's nano Ramatra or nano blade, and you don't have anything to stop these combos, I highly suggest trying to overly pressure the Ana. If you can either kill the Ana or put so much pressure on her that she messes up her ult, that could be a way that you actually win. Otherwise, you're just going to die to this combo, and there's nothing you're going to do about it. So you can't afford to be on the defensive and let the Ana dictate when the ultimate combo goes, because you're just going to lose to it outright. Put her in a bad situation, put her between a rock and a hard place, and just force the error. Next up, I do got to talk about Ashe, which is a character that doesn't have crazy big weaknesses. She's just pretty well-rounded, and she doesn't have a easy counter tip or anything like that. But what I would say is don't allow her to maintain a strong power position over your team. This could be a high ground off angle or something like that, where she just gets to take shot after shot after shot. These type of positions, the longer this Ashe gets to stay here, the more she's going to do. So regardless of the role you're on, you need to try to contest this person as quickly as possible and force her to back off at the very least, or you need to try to leave the area or try to route somewhere else, because you're just going to die to this character if she's left uncontested in this power position. Now, next up, we have Baptiste, and the biggest tip I can give you about Baptiste is, number one, his immortality field should be something that you are actively dealing with as fast as possible, and you're calming it and pinging it as well. And this goes double for characters that can actually deal with it easier, because some characters, some hit scans, characters like Hanzo or even Sojourn, and several other characters on the roster can deal with an immortality field rather easily, but other characters can't. It requires them to completely pivot what they're doing. It requires them to hard focus it, and if you can do it, you should do it the majority of the time. And then specifically with his amplification matrix, oftentimes you just don't even want to mess with it. Like, if he throws it up, give space, back up, break line of sight, and don't jiggle peek it. Don't even mess around with it. Oftentimes people will just get picked off because they don't respect it nearly enough, and you just need to completely back out. And unless you're in a position to push past it, just break line of sight and let the timer run out. Now, the next character that we have for you is Bastion, and I had a super in-depth Bastion guide filled with characters and strategies to counter Bastion. I would highly suggest checking that out, because you'll never lose to a Bastion again if you do. But a TLDR is find powerful abilities that you could land on Bastion. Nade, sleep, hook, rock, javelin. There's a whole bunch of abilities that you can hit on a Bastion that can shut him down. Use line of sight and natural cover to deny a Bastion's abilities, where if he pops his turret, you can back up out of line of sight. You're cutting line of sight while the ability's down, and you're not hard committing to open space when he still has his turret form. And then last up, mobility, getting around him, getting behind him, forcing him to turn around. There's a lot of characters that can force that and do that, and that is a really hard thing for Bastion to deal with. Next up, we do have Sombra, and especially if you are someone that has burst damage on your team, it's really your job to try to just contest Sombra as quickly as possible. Sombra can only hack one person, so if you are playing in a group, which oftentimes you should never be isolated when you're up against Sombras, you should always be trying to play together, because if you're together, it's really hard for a Sombra to deal with multiple people. And if you have that burst damage, you should always be looking to pressure that Sombra. One critical, one threat of death will get a Sombra to disappear. It's really important to not allow her to have extended uptime, because people that just hard focus a Sombra every time she pops out, she might get, 40% less ult charge throughout the course of a game, because she's not allowed to just linger for far too long. Next up, we do gotta talk about Hammond, and the tip I'll give you is that it's okay to shoot a Hammond when he's slamming onto your supports or slamming onto your DPS or your team or whatever the case may be, but the goal here is not to kill him. Most of the time, he's not reasonable to kill unless you have a lot of CC or tons of things that can stop him. What you're trying to do is force him away. So he comes in, you do enough damage to get him to run away so he can't just sit there and shoot your supports or shoot your DPS, and then when he's gone, you don't proceed to try to chase him around the map. You don't proceed to try to keep shooting him non-stop. Unless the Hammond makes a huge mistake, you're just not going to be able to kill him. So he wants you to just pressure and pressure and pressure him and spend your entire time trying to finish off someone that you're just never going to be able to. Still need to do damage to deny his engages, but your goal is just to dissuade him from sticking around. Next off is Brig, and I don't have any crazy tips for you on Brig. I would say that it's actually a lot easier to break her shield than you think. Oftentimes, players just don't even want to shoot a Brig that much if she's holding up her shield, but it's really easy to break. And oftentimes, if a Brig doesn't have her shield, she's limited on what she can actually do, no longer bash, and she's limited on her movement. So just keep in mind that it's breakable, and it's something that you can deal with rather easily. And then just try to stay out of her effective range, and don't allow her to just pivot onto you, especially with an ult out of nowhere. Next up, we do got to talk about Torb, and I would say that his turret is similar to Immortality Field, where it's just like all hands on deck, and there are certain characters that can deal with turret a lot better than others. As a Tracer, the last thing you want to do is double blink to a turret, one clip it, and then recall. Like, what a waste of resources. But sometimes you just have to. But if you have the means to deal with the turret from long range, or deal with the turret and not actually be afraid of it killing you, then do so. All hands on deck. You want your teammates to stop being so trash and do more. Help your teammates if you have the means to do so. Deal with this damn turret and then unleash the rest of your team so they're not being held captive by it. Next up, we do got to talk about Roadhog, and the tip I'll give you against Roadhog is that it's actually super easy to bait out a Roadhog hook, even against good hogs. And all you need to do is know where the hog is, right? And know an angle that the hog is looking at. He's looking at this angle, especially if you peek at angle intentionally, but you're not looking directly at the hog. So you're jiggle peeking an angle, but you're looking at something else, but you really know that the hog is looking at you. You're going to be able to bait hook really easily. It's actually comically easy to bait hooks, because you got to understand that from the hog's point of view in this meta, if he goes too long without hitting a hook, he's just throwing. Like, he has to hit a hook within a certain time frame, or else, like, as the time ticks down, he's throwing more and more. So you don't have to do anything crazy. You just have to make it so he's not effective and he's already throwing. Next up, we do got to talk about D.Va, which can be rather annoying to deal with, especially if she's always contesting you over and over again. And what I would really give you is there's two things you got to do against D.Va. Number one, actively fight for the powerful positions. Like, you can't just give up high ground places as a team. You really need to contest these powerful angles and powerful positions over and over again, and not give them up for free. The best thing that most D.Vas will do is you'll be on the high ground, and the second the tank will drop to the low ground, the D.Va will fly up to the high ground. She's like coaxing you in, baiting you in to give up your strong position. The second the tank's gone, she takes it. So you got to keep that in mind. And the second thing is, make sure that you're not isolated against the D.Va. She's someone that is like surgical in where she's looking for little gaps in the enemy team. So if you're a hit scan solo on the high ground, you're just going to get killed out of nowhere. And if you're a support, keep an eye out for people that are isolated. And in general, try to play at least in pairs or something like that, so you're a lot less vulnerable to a D.Va kind of picking you out. Next up, we got to talk about Doomfist, and I just gotta mention this because I keep coaching people that are doing this. Stop shooting power block. Like, stop giving a Doomfist power block. It's crazy how much more impactful a Doomfist is with power block. This should be rather obvious, but it is one that I've been seeing a lot of people do. They think that they can kill a Doom when he's like over 50% health with power block. You can't. You're going to give him his powerful ability, and he's going to roll your team with it. So just don't do that at all. And in addition to that, I need you to make sure that you are tracking when a Doom has ultimate. It's one of the most important things, because if you know when a Doom has ultimate, he's most likely going to be going for an all-in play very, very soon, and it can change how you're positioned and how you're playing. And especially playing in giant clumps, when a Doom has that ultimate, he's going to get a power punch and punch the whole team. Playing in clumps near a wall, even worse. So yeah, keep all these things in mind. Next up, we do got to talk about Mercy, and if you're just dealing with the Mercy that is a nah, and you just can't deal with this Mercy, Couple of things. Characters that can chase her around, I think, are actually pretty good. Characters that can apply a lot of pressure to her while she's flying through the air. Hit scans can be particularly good against her as well because she has to fly through open space. In fact, one character that forces her to move and one character that can do direct damage, that's an amazing combo to deal with the Mercy. So like a Tracer making this Mercy fly around, and then like a soldier whittling her down while she's in the air, really great combo, and something that you can do to shut down Mercies. Now, one thing I do see a lot is people really trying to kill Mercies when she's Valking, when they don't have super high burst damage. I mean, it's hard enough to like hit like a headshot, a Hanzo headshot on a Mercy that's flying, but trying to whittle her down with tracking on a character, unless you're a freaking god, it's going to be very hard. And the Mercy, if she has good movement, it's going to be nearly impossible. So just keep that in mind. Don't allow this Mercy to take up all your aggro, all your time when she's not very killable, and evaluate whether or not she's realistic for you to fight at all. Next up, we do got to talk about Echo, and a couple of things for Echo. Number one, make sure that you have your head on a swivel. Echoes love to float down from rooftops, and they don't make any noise and just mind bomb you out of nowhere. If you know the enemy team has an Echo, be very careful of rooftop drop downs, and if you don't see the Echo for an extended period of time, just keep your eyes open. Sometimes it could just be just you looking behind your shoulder or looking to the high ground, looking to the skies, and you just see an Echo just going for this play. And if you're a hit scan perched up somewhere thinking you're safe, and an Echo like kind of just glides in, mines you, beams you, gets out scot-free, that's the worst case scenario. So yeah, I would just say look out for that more than anything else. That's the one tip I got for you. Next up, we do got to talk about Widowmaker, and I would say for Widow, just make sure that you're not re-peeking the same angle. Constantly shift up the angles that you're challenging the Widow in. If you're fighting her head-to-head, prioritize movement over accuracy. Make yourself as hard to hit as possible with crouch spamming, left-right spamming. These are going to be how you dodge that headshot, and even if you're trading damage at a lesser rate, it's better than being one-tapped. So you would rather make the Widowmaker less accurate and you less accurate than make y'all both more accurate because you just die right away to one headshot within the right range. Now, next up, we do got to talk about Reaper, and if you're kind of being dominated by a Reaper, there's two things you need to consider. Number one, make sure that you're taking note of where the Reaper is going. What high ground is he going on? And be very scary of high grounds that you don't know if a Reaper is there or not, especially if he's been playing there. Reapers love to teleport to a high ground perch, wait there, and then drop down on like your backline or somebody out of nowhere. But if you know he's coming, it's way easier to force that Wraith out. And that leads me to the second thing. Make sure that you're focusing this Reaper out at all times. The idea is to focus him out and make him leave. Now, oftentimes, unless you're some characters that could chase him down, he's not killable post-Wraith, and you don't really want to chase him around a corner or in a building or anything like that. Your goal is just to get him out of there as quickly as possible, similar to the advice I gave to you on Hammond, and also make sure that you're prepared when he has that ultimate, and you're conserving cooldowns that can shut him down right away or boop him away, because if you don't have them, you're just going to die to a Reaper ult. Next up, we have Genji, and a couple of tips that I got for you up against Genji if he's just really slaughtering your team. Number one, if you're a support, don't allow your teammates to really get low, and especially if a Genji dashes in at your DPS or at another support, your priority is not to shoot the Genji. Your priority is to heal your teammate and keep them alive and prevent that Genji from getting his dash reset. The idea against a Genji is that you want to stabilize against every single one of his abilities. He dashes in, heal yourself, stabilize, play to live, play to build yourself up. So you're trying to trigger your passive heal. You're trying to make yourself as strong as possible because Genji is always based on his cooldowns. He kind of lives or dies by them. And there's a window of time where he can do something when he engages. Your goal is not necessarily to just shit on him right away and fight him in a 50-50. Oftentimes your goal is to lengthen his engagement to the point where your team comes and helps you, you get your abilities back, the Genji gets isolated. You got to remember that Genji wants really fast engagements. He wants to get in, get out. He doesn't want to be fighting for a very long time, and if you could lengthen that time, you're going to win against him. So this is really important. I've won many games and many fights because people want to either kill me and turn the tables on me as Genji, or they want to die. Like, it's one of the two. And I'm telling you that you don't have to play for that all the time. And most of the time that puts you at a fundamental disadvantage because Genji has tools to win when the fights are fast. Deflect, dash, wall climb. He has those tools. Don't play to his strengths and just utilize your team and the fact that he's playing in your team's control position to your advantage. Next up, we have Hanzo. Make sure that if you're up against a Hanzo, you're not jumping a lot. Good Hanzos will always hit you in the head if you're jumping. This is a tip just in general. You should stop jumping more, but Hanzos will always punish you if they're fairly good. Always keep your headphones on. I can't tell you how many people I've been headphone checking, even in freaking Grandmaster. Pay attention to the sound of Sonic Arrow. I can't express this enough. So important, and if you just aren't paying attention to it, you're just going to die to a Hanzo for free, which is very frustrating. And then also master the stagger step against Hanzos, which instead of doing a left-right crouch spam, you're doing a erratic left-right movement. So like right, left, right, left, left, right. So it's just like a random movement that is really hard for Hanzos to actually perfectly track mid-range because they're trying to predict you a little bit. And it can be a really great movement tech to kind of ingrain in your mind, because knowing this movement tech, in my opinion, from mid-range, all of a sudden you have a decent advantage even with characters like Soldier and even Cassidy. But without this movement tech, on average, I think you're going to lose the matchup from that range. So yeah, it's a big deal. It's actually a really big deal to learn it. Next up, I have Alari, and the tip I'll give you up against Alari is to respect her. I mean, right now I can't give you anything super in-depth, but just respect her damage. Treat her like you would treat a lot of other DPS, where she has the means to turn the tables on you. If you give her easy shots, she can flip a matchup out of nowhere. Don't be jumping. Don't be lacking that respect. Don't be psycho pushing her all the time just because she's low. Realize that a good Alari is going to be able to turn that tables on you really quickly, so you have to take every fight with that in mind, and just don't give her these easy shots when you think you're going to win the matchup, and you push in and give her just a really easy headshot. Next up, we do got to talk about Sim, and the tip I'll give for you against her is just make sure that you're really focusing on these turrets, doing it for your team, especially if you're a tank that just doesn't care about the turrets as much as your team. Make sure you're doing it to help your team. Also, make sure that you're constantly destroying TPs. Do not allow a TP to just sit there. I know that she's not taking it right now. The second you are not paying attention to the TP, I promise you she'll take it out of nowhere and kill somebody. Keep this in mind. Just destroy it. Pretty much any of the utility that just sticks around, destroy it. Immortality, turret, freaking teleport, destroy all of it. Don't allow this to stay along the battlefield. It's freaking super important to do so. Now, next up, we do got to talk about Kiriko. And the thing that everyone gets frustrating against the Kiriko is their plays get denied all the time by Suzu. Like, they're going for a play, and the Kiriko teleports in and Suzus. And you got to understand that if you are the only diver/aggressive character on your team, whether you're Echo, Genji, Tracer, Winston, Doomfist, you got to understand that she's not using her Suzu for anyone but you. Like, you're the one that she's going to hold it for. So it's not being heavily pressured, which means that you can't all in anybody unless you actively know she doesn't have it. Your team is very aggressively going in, and there's an active exchange of a ton of resources, or you're going to have a really fast time to kill where she's not going to have much time to react. If you go for a fight that takes a bit too long, you're just going to lose it to a Kiriko coming in and Suzuing, and you probably shouldn't have taken that fight in the first place. Play it in a position where you can threaten and apply pressure, but perhaps not full engage until your team is also applying a ton of pressure. Now, things dramatically change if you have someone else that is putting value and pressure and resources into the Kiriko, overloading that Suzu, but that means that you can change up your playstyle dependent on these factors. Next up, we do got to talk about Lucio, and the tip I'll mainly give you about Lucio is just about countering boops, making sure that you're very careful about how you're routing and where you're routing on certain maps. There's a lot of maps like on Lijiang where you can get booped off really easily, and there's a number of different maps where you got to understand that if you don't have a Lucio, then Lucio's going to get into position to boop you off first. So your routing needs to change. You need to take things a little bit slower. Sometimes you need to go take the safe route, because there's so many teams that are just gambling that this Lucio's not going to be in the position at the right time, and Yeah, maybe in the lower ranks, the Lucios aren't getting their rollouts right and they're not getting ready in the right positions. But I promise you, as you go up against better and better Lucios, you need to give him ample respect. Don't allow him to get like a giant amount of ult charge and a free first fight just because you don't respect what a Lucio can pull off. And yeah, it's just super important for you to do. Next up, we do get to talk about Cassidy, and Cassidy's not in a great state right now, and I don't really have any super great tips to shut him down. I would just say that you just have to respect his nade. That's pretty obvious, but most of the time, if you are playing in his very, very close range, you need to have a plan to either win the fight right away or an ability that will help you pull all the way out. This is not really where you want to fight a Cassidy, where he can hit a grenade onto you very easily. Shuts down pretty much every single character if it gets stuck by it. So I'd suggest abusing his Peacekeeper nerf and just playing at a more mid to long range against Cassidy the majority of the time, because he's the deadliest at close range right now than he's ever been. Next up, we do got to talk about Mei, and I would say that you got to be very careful about the choke points and different areas on the map that you transverse to. Most people don't respect the wall enough when if you do cross like a little area and then intentionally pull back, so you're jiggle peeking certain corridors, you can bait a wall rather easily and she's just going to rise you up instead and you're going to be able to get out scot-free. Another thing, if you have someone trapped behind a wall, freaking shoot it and call to your team where you're going to push the wall. Where are you going to shoot the wall? Is it in the mid? Is it on the right side? Call it to your team. I know that this requires you to talk and you're a little shy, but make sure that you're doing it because it can save a teammate. It can save a tank. Super important. The idea is to open up a little bit of a gap so that your tank can get some heals through the gap. That's the idea. Next up, we do got to talk about Moira, and I will say that Moira gets a lot of value in 1v1 fights because people panic. Oftentimes, up against a character like Moira, the goal is to be as accurate as possible. So if you're Cassidy, Hanzo, Sojourn, I don't care what you are, Kiriko, whatever, you're not trying to move around like a psychopath and dodge a Moira, because what are you dodging? Is she going to miss a single shot? No, she's not. But when you're moving like a crazy person, it makes it a lot harder for you to. So slow down your movement, even to a standstill, focus on hitting criticals and turn the fight on her. This requires you to be cool and calm under pressure, but it's one of the big skill tests to climb to the higher ranks. This is something that you need to learn and something you need to master, so it's important. Next up, we have Orisa, and I did also make a huge guide about how to counter Orisa. TLDR, stop shooting at the Orisa. Don't put yourself in positions where you have to shoot at the Orisa. Play high grounds and off angles, and cry. No, I'm just kidding. But watch the video that I made on it. It goes into a lot more detail. Next up, we do got to talk about Pharah, and I'm also going to kind of talk about Pharah Mercy together with this. The reality of this is, if you are not playing a character that can directly interact, you need to either be supporting people on your team that can interact, so that means like pocketing other hit scans or making sure that the other people are not pushing up on the people that can contest the Pharah Mercy, or you need to be aggressively pressuring the people that are still left on the ground. Like, as a hypothetical, let's say you're Tracer and they're Pharah Mercy Ana. You could be trying to constantly dive that Ana, so if that Ana needs peel and the Mercy has to leave the Pharah, it kind of creates opportunity to kill the Pharah. Otherwise, you're just not going to be very effective up against this Pharah Mercy. Like, there's nothing you can directly do to her. Otherwise, besides this, just swap. Like, there's so many characters that have game against Pharah Mercy, and if you're a tank and you're playing, I don't know, Reinhardt, and you're mad that you can't deal with the Pharah Mercy, yeah, you can't do anything to her. I'm sorry. You really need to play a character that can. Diva's the best one. You should probably learn her, and you'll die a lot less to Pharah Mercy. Next up, we do got to talk about Ramattra, and I would say that Ramatra's biggest weakness is the fact that you can deny a lot of his engages with simple abilities. So let's say he pops Nemesis and walks in. You can punch him away as Doom. You can boop him away as Diva and fly back, javelin him, wall him off, freaking sleep him, nade him, rock him. There's a million different abilities that you can kind of stick to him, because unlike other characters, he doesn't really have a great way to protect himself in the same way that some of these other characters do. And I do think that you really need to make sure that you're conserving these cooldowns to deny his pivots to the brawl, punchy punch Nemesis form. Because let's say you just nade him in the neutral or sleep him in the neutral, and then all of a sudden that fades, he gets healed, and then now he has nothing that is going to stop him when he goes brawl mode. So just keep that in mind. Oftentimes the goal is to make it so he's not very impactful and you're denying a lot of his pivots into a more aggressive stage of play. Next off, we do got to talk about Junker Queen, and it's kind of similar where you want to make sure that you have your abilities to deny her aggressive pivots and make sure that you're not overly isolated, because while if you get hit with the knife and pulled in, it's really, really hard to do anything about that. Like, it's really hard to position in a way where you don't die to that, but you should never be in a position where a Junker Queen can just shout and pivot upon you very easily. And for the love of God, if a Junker Queen has a choke, please stop 5-man pushing out of this choke. There's way too many guru montages of him getting 5-man cleaves. Just stop it, okay? Next up, we do gotta talk about Reinhardt, and really, the thing that Reinhardt hates the most is characters that are applying pressure behind him. Like, he really doesn't like a Tracer or even a Genji applying pressure from, like, behind his shoulder, because there's just nothing he can do to interact with that. And in addition to that, make sure that you understand that even though your dive DPS or your dive tank is going in on the enemy backline, does not mean that the Rein will pivot back. There's a lot of times where a Rein will just hold the line, pressure out the backline, and then maybe even shatter people, 2-3 people in the backline, and just win the fight that way. You need to give Rein his ample respect, his ability to pivot on the fly by being able to pin backwards as well. And if a Rein is willing to just solo or duo shatter, there's very little that you could do to deny it besides making it so his shatters don't get even more people, right? Position in a way that is away from each other, spread out a bit, don't play all up in a group. But the last tip I'll give you is that you need to use your abilities to deny his pins. And especially when you're playing a character that has a further effective range than Rein, which is most characters, don't allow the Rein to pin in and get close to you when you don't have any abilities, right? Your abilities are meant to deny those pins, right? You're not trying to use your Sigma Rock in the neutral. You're trying to use it to deny Rein from coming close to you and swinging on you. You're not trying to use your sleep in the neutral. You're using it to deny a Rein pinning in and closing the gap. And you're constantly keeping distance from this character that gets value from being up close. Next up, we do got to talk about Sigma, and I would say that you should always be trying to poke down his shield. Don't allow his shield to just stay up. It's super, super easy to break. Recognize that Sigma is very uncomfortable with characters behind him. He really wants to have everyone in front of him, so characters that get around him, very annoying. And then characters that get on top of him, also what he doesn't like. He wants to keep his distance, control the pace of play slow, poke people out. Don't let him sit in that comfortable sweet spot. If a Sigma is just kind of decimating your team, pushing up, taking these positions, you need to understand that Sigma is kind of like an all hands on deck type of character, where if you keep trying to push him alone or challenge him alone, you're gonna die to him over and over again. It's better to group up with your team, challenge him together, don't play into his game, and make sure that you put him in uncomfortable situations as well. Next up, we do got to talk about Sojourn, and similar to Ashe, I don't have crazy tips for you on this character. Make sure that she's not allowed to maintain a powerful position for too long. Doesn't matter who you are, you need to either route somewhere else or deny it at all possible. She stays there too long, she'll kill your whole team. And then also note when she has rail, and even calm when she has rail. It's a good idea because people are gonna fight you different, and oftentimes you can play in a way where you just jiggle a corner, bait out rail, and then you can fight her as normal, and you're not gonna risk just taking a giant chunk to the head. Next up, we do gotta talk about Soldier 76, a character that doesn't really have a crazy amount of weaknesses. Like, there's nothing that you can actively super exploit. But what I would say is if you're ever in like a close to mid-range fight with Soldier, most of the time, it's in your best interest to actually double down on being more aggressive as opposed to trying to lengthen the fight. So I see this all the time when like Genjis and Tracers are trying to fight a Soldier, where the Tracer doesn't push into one clip this Soldier or like really try to heavily pressure his health total. The Genji doesn't get really, really close to try to hit multiple shurikens in the head. And if you just keep fighting this elongated fight against a Soldier that gets to just chill in his heal station, you're gonna lose. So you got to understand that you need to be using your abilities to actively trade for chunks of his health and really trying to win this fight as opposed to just trying to keep fighting him. You're gonna lose that over time. Next up, I do got to talk to you about Tracer, and the tip I would give for you mainly is similar to the Sombra tip. Don't allow a Tracer to just exist for too long. Make her exhaust her abilities while she's in your backline. Don't allow her to take things at her pace. And similar to what I talked about with the Genji example, if you're a support or even a DPS, most of the time your goal is to not kill the Tracer. Sometimes it's not even to force her out. It's just to live her abilities. Like, if a Tracer is fighting you a lot, getting you low, don't lay it on the line to either kill her or die, right? Sometimes the solution is to just regroup with your team, back away, play to leave, play to live, get healed up, waste that Tracer's time, fight her when you're with your team. There's other ways to deal with the Tracer opposed to just one tapping her or two tapping her or whatever. Next up on this list, we do gotta talk about Lifeweaver, which is the new kid on the block that is being rather annoying right now. A couple of things: make sure that you're not trying to fight Lifeweaver on the low ground when you know Lifeweaver has Petal. They're gonna get away from you really quickly, and it would be a good idea that if they don't have Petal, that's the moment when they're most vulnerable. Now, I would say that Lifeweaver is a very important target to focus. He does have a rather large hitbox, and he is a character that, while he does have a lot of health, is really hard to deal with if you don't deal with him first, mainly because he just provides so much heal botting value to the rest of the team. So just keep these things in mind. Even though he's a little bit slippery and hard to kill, sometimes it's an all hands on deck situation, and someone that you should keep applying pressure to, preventing his auto heal and making it so he runs out of options after his utility runs out. Next up, we do have Winston for you, and a couple of tips I'll have for you. Number one, Winston oftentimes is a character that wants to jiggle in and out of his bubble, and I would say that it's in your best interest to get out of the bubble as quickly as possible, or break it, or both. You just really don't want to be playing in a bubble, in and around a bubble with a Winston, mainly because not only does he get extra sustain and survivability against abilities when he's in the bubble, but oftentimes your supports are trying to help you, and if they don't have good line of sight on you because of the bubble, it can be very hard for them to do so. In addition to that, a Winston that wants to keep taking high ground, if you have any boop abilities, it's a really great idea to just constantly deny it over and over again. Jumps into the high ground, booster him off, punch him off as Doom, freaking CC him off, whatever the case may be. Just keep him on the low ground and invest resources into just pushing him where he doesn't want to be over and over again. Don't let him jump to a power position, stay there, and then execute another jump. That's worst case scenario, because he can apply pressure and then kind of finish the job when he sees an opportunity. Next up, let's talk about Zarya, and I will say, while it's important to not shoot Zarya bubble in the neutral to give her full charge, don't allow bubble to become immortality. This is a big one where Zarya is very, very weak, getting out of the fight, and really you should break the bubble and kill her, reset her, because if she gets out with that much charge, she's gonna roll your team when she gets her bubbles back and she has so much charge. So yeah, while it is important to not focus it too much, make sure that you kill her when it's reasonable to do so. And of course, you're going to have to limit test this and get used to it. And of course, if you have a duo partner or if you're calming, this is going to be easier to do, but it's very, very important to understand. Last up, we do have Zen, and I will say that there's a couple of tips I got for you on Zen. Number one is, if you are trying to make an aggressive player about to, you should de-peek the Zen and then get rid of the Discord and then challenge very aggressively after that. And yes, he's going to put it right back on you, but at the very least, you're not going to eat a freaking 5-ball with the Discord on you right at the bat, right when you pivot in aggressively. So you're going to take less initial damage, and hopefully you can close the gap. In addition to that, Zen is also a character that is fragile, does have a lot of characters that can harass him. Genji, Tracer, Sombra, Hammond is characters that can come after him, and these are sometimes characters that you have to swap to if you want to heavily pressure a really, really good Zen that's getting a bit too much value. But just one of these alone might not be enough, because good Zens know how to position, they play with their team, and they're mechanically very, very good. Now, this video just goes over surface level tips against every single character in the game, but if you have any other questions, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Do me a solid and smash the like, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.